Thank you very much for staying here. So yeah, I'm Chloe Laborde, and I'm only oversee the work placements for French. I'm not Ian. But what I wanted to talk about today is our institutions, the GW4 institutions. And so I'm very interested in hearing from our colleagues from UCL if they have any different approaches, different initiatives in their institution. And so how do they approach AI in teaching and learning? And also you'll see that we'll see how the fact that we're doing language is different. So the fact that maybe what the institutions are thinking doesn't actually match with the specificity of language learning and teaching. So what we'll cover, why now, the teaching matters, so that's from the teacher's point of view, student perspective, that's from a study that's being conducted in Bristol, and that's gonna cover some of the same points seen in Cardiff, but also some other points that haven't been seen because it's not from language students, so the point of view is slightly different. Institution concerns, which are like two main ideas of how to look, what needs to be done, what should institution focus on. A few resources, because you may discover some in your own universities that you didn't know about, and then we'll have the discussion with the panel. So first, why now? Just a quick definition of, we're talking about generative AI here, so I'm using the definition that's given to our students, which is artificial intelligence, which can be used to create text, computer code, image, music, and many other forms of media. And then it's about an accelerated timeline. I've talked to a few people from the different universities, and the word that came was an explosion of misuse of AI in assessment. Interestingly, the one university that didn't say that was Cardiff, because Cardiff has a different approach. Their approach to, when it comes to assessment, was the idea that you can prove the use of AI, and thus it's not pursued as academic misconduct in itself, like false referencing, poor referencing, that AI creates what we call hallucinates, so creates references that don't exist, or creates plot points that don't exist, create characters that don't exist, that kind of stuff. And so, interestingly, in Cardiff, they didn't mention explosion because it means they don't go after the students of languages. If they're supposed to write something in the language is perfect. As an expert in the language, you know that has not been written by a student or solely by a student, but they don't pursue that, whereas the other three universities do pursue it. So that's a difference here that's quite big, I would say. So since 2023, as much as 500% increase in academic misconduct suspicion related to AI from it's very limited data I've given. These are broad number, but just to give you an idea, and I'm guessing many of you may have been involved in the process, which I'll show you later, which is quite interesting. And then Russell Group, as my colleagues mentioned, the idea of focus on AI literacy that were published last year. So just to have a look at it very quickly, so that idea of becoming AI literate, and that staff should be equipped to support students to generate, so exactly what you guys are doing, and as well as adapt teaching and assessment to incorporate the ethical use of generative AI, which is interesting. And so rigor in integrity as well. And also university would work collaboratively to share best practice as we're doing today. And as I hope this will really make you want to do even more. Teaching matters. So first point, creating resources. There's new tools available to create. So as colleagues were saying, to just like create, text with gaps, fill in the gaps type of text to work on vocabulary lists, that kind of stuff. But as you may also be aware, we're talking about it. We had an AI kind of day of language teaching and research. And our colleagues in German and our colleagues in Russian were saying, well, I did an exercise, I created an exercise to like, give me 10 sentences to work on relative clauses. I think it was in Russian, they said, and half of them were wrong. So it's also that use of that doesn't actually work. Interestingly, that brings back to a thing the student said, which is AI, use it, but don't trust it. So students are very aware of the limits of AI, and I think teachers are also aware of it, but it's also that point of meeting and making sure everyone understands what the limits are. Assessment design, so that exactly, interestingly, as we saw, is your assessment AI proof or is it AI enabled? Are the instructions on how much AI may be used are clear, exactly as our colleagues were saying with telling students you can do that, you can do that. So Our universities have different documents aimed at students that explain that kind of stuff. But I think it's also important for teachers to understand clearly. For example, at Bristol, they say, well, you can use AI as much as whatever the unit description and the assessment description says you can. If it says you can't, then you can. And if it says use those tools, then you can use those tools. So the teachers do have quite a few, some liberty as to how much they want to use it and integrate it. And then the training, so by education specialists, we all have some type of centers for teaching and learning in our universities, and they are very well staffed, and they are very well specialized. Interestingly though, for example, Exeter has, I think it's 6 different workshops aimed at AI use for staff, which are great, but none of them mention the specificity of language AI use. So then in a way, it's too generalized. So it's a very good base, but as I call it, we need to create specific language guidelines, basically. And then translation, learning from our colleagues. So if you have an MA in translation in your university, go talk to your colleagues in translation, because they did that 5 to 10 years ago. So they know how to use machine translation, how to create assessments that use that. So I do think this is a matter of checking. The one interesting point about this is that AI tools, for example, saying, oh, this is a translation, compare the original text with this default translation and make a commentary, that's a great thing to do, but that's only available for students at like B2 level. So what do I do with the ab initio levels? How do I do when we want to work on very basic types of grammatical translation to make sure the students still engage with that? Then our student perspectives. Oh, good. So this is from Aisling Tierney and her colleagues in Bristol. So it's coming up in 2025. And so it's a study called Student Perceptions on the Impact of AI in Their Teaching and Learning. So similar to what you guys did, but it's overall university, so not language specific. And there were some very good points I want to point out to you. First, 79% already use AI to support their studies. Second, the concerns, which are very interesting, were first for equity. Equity in the way of some AI tools you have to pay for, up to like £20 a month. Some students can easily afford it, some can't. So in the idea of create assessment, AI-enabled assessment, you have to think, yeah, but is this tool actually free and available? So that's one point, that's quite interesting. The other point, obviously, is the bias, which we've seen earlier also with our keynote speaker, is that there's a lot of bias in the language that's created. So that may create issues for students, or you at least have to include that in the training. A great number that's really stuck with me, it's 9 out of 67 students involved in the study said they have not used AI, and the reasons were interesting. First, it was personal moral objections. Some of our students do not want to use AI. They say they understand the 2 main reasons is, one, AI is theft. A lot of the content created to train, the data created to train the AI sometimes has been used and obtained without the consent of the main creators. Some of it is environmental. It has a horrendous environmental impact. And so some students are like, well, we can't say, we're committed to zero emission by 2020 in 2030, if at the same time we encourage all of us to use AI that is so bad for the planet. So there are some students who do not want to. So the question is also then, you know, what is becoming AI literate? Can we force our students to interact with a tool they are opposed to? How do you present that? You present it then as a necessary professional skill that they may not want to use later, but they should understand how it works potentially. Also, lack of understanding. They don't know when and how they can use it, so they simply don't want to. And so academic penalty concerns. So in that way, I don't want to use it because I'm afraid I'm going to get academic misconduct, get points taken off, that kind of stuff. Number 4 is stress. Very interesting. So first, one of the things we've seen, for example, in Bristol for this year is, okay, just come back to in-person exams, because the coursework, there's definitely an issue here. We don't know quite yet how to deal with it. We're going to do in-person exams. One of the issues that is exams can create a lot of stress for students, which is one of the reasons why we went towards coursework in the last 10 years, I'm going to say. And so that's still there. Students still feel a lot of stress. If you have more exams, it's like 1 week they'll have 3 different exams, 3 completely different topics. And so you have to think of the well-being aspect. Second, AI detection. The tools, they worry about the detection of AI, the fact that those tools are very unreliable. Interestingly, they're not really available for languages other than English so far, at least not widely. So that doesn't really concern us too much, but also students are afraid of their work being flagged as AI when it's not. And so that was also a point mentioned earlier. I think the idea of some of the languages, if you're a non-native speaker of like English and you're working in English, some of the sentence may look like AI, but it just is like over formal or that kind of stuff. But that's going to be flagged up as AI when it's just how you were taught to use the language, and that you may not have as much flexibility as native speakers. Social friction was, I think, one of my favorites, which is hearing of housemates, friends, fighting over AI. Our students are in disagreement. They're like, no, how can you shouldn't be using AI for that. That's not fair. I can't believe you're using it. No, we shouldn't be using it. And the moral issue here comes in. And it actually creates quite a bit of friction, which is interesting. It's very good to have students who are, socially conscious. And existential dread, which I'm going to touch back again, what's the point? And students are coming up with that more and more. What's the point of spending 27K on an education at the minimum if, anyway, this computer can make those calculations, can do X, Y, Z? And the pushback, interestingly, is the question was, would you be okay with your assessment being marked by AI? And no. Which I think is worth knowing. Not that, I mean, we know why, but it's interesting to know that the students are very concerned about that to some extent. Institution and faculty concerns. So then to address these questions and these issues, on the one side, you get assessment. So I will say reviewing the academic misconduct process, as I said, with the explosion of cases of academic misconduct appearing, the process is very complicated. I'm going to show you the one is from Bath. So some of you may be aware of it. Hopefully it's going to open. Let me just double check. Would you mind helping me just showing this? I don't want to mess anything up. So that's the page I'd like to be able to show.
Sorry, it's really awkward. Do you need to go back to the presentation?
Yeah, that's okay.
I'll stay here for a minute.
Yeah, no, that's good. Lovely.
Why is that still there? Sorry, everyone. 2 seconds.
There you go. Okay, it's just to show you the size of it, which I think is quite fascinating.
Sorry, it's just
No, good. So this is student facing, okay, from this university, as what happens if I'm suspected of breach of academic conduct. So the squares are just explanation of the steps. The round bits are explanation for the student, just what to expect basically. But this is just so you start here as your director of studies has been notified that there are some concerns. So notice it has been notified. The director of study has already been notified. So there's the examiner who first have to make a case to the director of study. Then the director of study takes care of it, okay? So I just want you to see the scale. That's what I'm interested in. So have a look. Oh, no, it's not this one. Well, how do I do this? Yeah, there we go. Oh, that's quite complicated. Oh, that's quite long, surely. Oh, no, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? This is how long it is. If you go, so basically, if a student is, basically the shortest bit is here if the student is found not guilty of academic misconduct, okay? This is if the student is found, is it major or minor? And so then you have like, so again, found if the student disagrees and wants to appeal. Again, found if the students want to disagree or appeal. So this is very long, very heavy. The workload included in that is quite, it's just not feasible with the amount of cases that are coming up, which is why it's so important to take care of it. Do you mind putting me back on the position? This is nothing against Bath, it's just a great way to present it. It's very similar in all the institutions, which is also why teachers don't want to say, by the way, there's a suspicion case of AI, because it's so hard to prove. The burden of proof is a huge burden, actually, for staff. Thank you. So that's what I mean by workload concerns. How do we take care of it? It's also a workload concern of, oh, we have to keep training staff on new things. So it's creating the training material, taking the time, training the staff, changing all the things. So there's quite a bit of it. And the drink driving approach. This is something that's being, it's a possibility for Bristol, which is, so in order to simplify that whole process, if a student is suspected of using AI, they're just given the chance to resit the assessment, and they're sent on it's basically like half a day course on how to use AI properly. So what I call drink driving approach, as in that's what it's used for drink drivers. You go on a training course. If you're, I mean, hopefully no one knows about this, but so it's that idea of having courses multiple times a year. So yeah, for year one students, so that then in year one, if they're ever caught misusing AI, they learn about it as quick as possible, and then they can go on year two and hopefully use it better. Last bit, reassurance, address students' concerns. Obviously, our students are concerned. So center on humanities, as in remind them you're studying humanities. We're here to help you raise your voice, use your voice in different languages, be yourself in different languages. And so, for example, in Bristol, they're really reworking the narrative to put that forward, so they understand what's the point of studying languages. And consistent training for, I think that's very important. So if you look at, if I show you just the resources, this is, I don't know why it's happening. This is just what's available outside of the intranet. So there's a lot more resources, especially for Cardiff. A lot of it is on the intranet, similar to Bristol. But this is what you can have a look at already that you may not already know was available. There you go. So thank you, and now we can move on to the discussion. Thanks.